Okay, this is the Kubernetes Container Identity Working Group for September 2018. So today on the agenda, I think Clayton maybe put this on from the last meeting. I wasn't at the last meeting. Talking about 113 goals. I don't think he's actually here. Maybe Mike, do you want to have a stab at what you think 113 goals are? Or I'm not sure we're actually prepared for this discussion, but if someone else wants to talk to this, that's also
fine. Yeah, well, it looks like Clayton's goals are for people to start using this API. And
can we define what this is in the?
I assume he's like he has not defined. So
yeah,
I'm going to guess that he's talking about token request.
Okay.
Performance reliability characteristics of extra token calls on pod startup, latency implications. Yeah, so I guess Clayton has a high-level goal to test performance of the token request API. I guess an avenue for doing that is to make sure that the surface is covered in our scalability tests. That's probably a good work item for somebody to take, or Clayton or I will grab it. Essentially, I guess what we would want to do is to make sure that pod started during a kubemark suite, specify token request volumes. That seems straightforward. Actually, I'm not sure if kubemark will actually test that, and that might have to just be the main scalability suites.
We watch secrets, but I don't know that we actually process volumes other than that. But it might actually be a good thing to add to kubemark. Honestly, I as a test framework tool, it seems reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good. I'll have an AI to actually write that in a bug. What I would like to see is a design for migrating the current service account admission controller to using token requests with a however long roadmap of releases that's going to take. I think that'd be something that would be useful to explore.
Yeah, I think it's the right time to write that, Cap.
And yeah, get people to start using it. I guess the best way to do this is maybe write a blog post.
It's alpha now, right? Or what's it? What?
It's beta. It's beta 12. So maybe write a blog post or tweet about documentation. Try to get people to be aware of it. I don't know. That's about the best I can think to do. Do you have any other ideas, Clayton?
It's tough because I think so. The kubemark one actually makes me feel a little bit more comfortable because a lot of the hit we get is we don't ramp it up early. I mean, we could do some big runs and just make sure that we've optimized the request side. I am a little worried about the impact of the volume source, but again, I think those are all tests that we could create in a reproducible fashion without requiring any sort of hijinks. Maybe the KEP is where it's actually kind of good. Like if we do the KEP while doing this in parallel, one of the characteristics of the KEP would be path to GA, work through a 2-release thing or a 3-release thing where we go increasingly and push, these pieces through. I don't have anything other than the KubeMark thing right now.
Mike, can you remind me, like, just at like a higher level, in terms of like someone like Volt switching to this, like what are there more work items remaining?
Yes. It turns out that the designing an API for token review that is both backwards compatible and capable of authenticating tokens for different audiences is very difficult.
Yeah, the service account controller one that Mike mentioned, I would say, is the most concrete of that's part of the switch, but then we need the review to be there. And then we need to come up with a design point on whether we would remove service account secrets as they are, like stop them from being created, or whether that's an additional opt-in that people do over several releases.
I guess for like Volt's use case, though, like if we were to take like what they're doing now with doing their token review, like just with the service account, like they don't really care if Kubernetes has migrated away from using service accounts internally to make that change, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I guess it would be nice to, write down what would get them, or any other, I'm just using Volt as an example, any other identity provider to be able to use that.
Yeah, and that was our original use case. So
yeah.
We can talk about how we're continuing that. The other one that's been brought up before is the giving pods unique identities. I'll go see if I can rustle up one of the ones we've brought up before.
We did that.
Oh, we did?
12, I think.
No, I mean like find a consumer who uses it.
A consumer who uses it. All right. So we actually very recently added. What did we add? We added the pod claim in 1.12. We added that specifically for the storage driver.
Oh, the CSI one.
Local storage driver.
Okay.
Because they wanted to use that. The hard part is now writing ACLs in RBAC for those things.
Right.
So
maybe we should work that use case. Like that would be the second use case then we just work, which is put that in the cap as the first use case was the Vault, second use case was concrete storage and ACL and what we have to do to push it forward.
Yeah. Me and Tim and CJ have discussed a design for that. And we think we have a pretty reasonable approach, but we need to write it up.
I would be excited to see that because there are quite a few people building nasty, ugly integrations today that want something similar.
Essentially, it's a union between the node authorizer and RBAC, and we're going to call it a node role binding or something like that. And if the node authorizer for the node identity and an RBAC role for the service account identity both return true, where the node identity can be derived from the pod, then we say we're happy. So that's the gist of it. We need to write it up into a cap.
To be pedantic, that's an intersection authorizer.
Intersection authorizer. Thank you, CJ.
Fundamental Boolean logic. What could possibly go wrong? That would actually be funny if we did implement it as a union.
A union of knots.
Yeah. Jordan knows well the pain of, oh wait, we missed this one subtle detail which completely invalidated everything we were doing with security. He would probably laugh at that.
And kind of P2s for me are to push on the OIDC doc I think that would be useful. It doesn't have to take the form of just an OIDC discovery doc exposed by the API server. Perhaps maybe we could write a tool that helps publish discovery docs to GCS or S3 from the service account public keys. But I think that would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of and so this is more of a selfish one, but like a lot of our cases for Bootstrap, this has come up a couple of times, is discovery on cluster of these in a fairly orthogonal way. Like a lot of what we're doing is trying to move cluster setup to be post control plane boot. And then, with more operators running, some of these use cases do come up. I'll try to come back with a more concrete one on the OIDC part, or on the discovery doc part, rather.
Okay. And then I had some ideas around hardening of the tokens. Hardening. Yeah, specifically, I was thinking that it would be interesting if we had options to store the tokens or secrets encrypted on the file system, so that we don't like random, or if there's like server side file read vulnerabilities, we don't expose them. And potentially key binding of tokens. We have this really scary package I think it's like package routers. And then we have this logging file server, which...
That is the most useful thing ever.
It is the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I remember when that went in and we put it under the debug flag, and we're like, no one will ever turn this on. And then we turned it on right away because exec was originally not going to be on all the time. And then, obviously exec is somewhat useful. That one is actually a good one. I feel like we need to queue this up for a SIG-auth discussion, but I'd actually like to go through and do a review of that whole package in the 113 timeframe and either formalize it or constrain it, because it is incredibly useful for operational side, but it is incredibly risky.
Yeah. That sounds good to me. I wonder how much audit logging replaces the usefulness of it.
It does.
That's my question. What do you think is the gap, Clayton, between audit logging and those logs?
This is so I actually would classify, this is maybe like the topic I was going to bring up in SIG-auth, which I haven't done yet, is just across the board, the idea of debug endpoints, like the config-z stuff that we have struggled with, pprof, log access to the core logs on a system, and then the idea of formalizing debug endpoints for our infrastructure components. Like if you want to, like an example that people always bring up is for like an SDN service, and the metrics endpoint is another variant of this, like observability endpoints, trying to formalize those and put those under some sort of like reasonable framework, because the debug pprof endpoint is another example of something that you could use to root a machine, right? You can use it to do, you can use profiling to do side channel attacks on private key in process. So getting the idea of, we want debug endpoints because they're incredibly useful operationally. If we can figure out a way to bring them together under a reasonable framework, like, how do we audit them? How do we verify them? Having those as tools available for us to say, like, why is this node down? Well, you have to SSH in. Oh, well, SSH is down. The kubelet's up. Simplifying and standardizing some of that. It's the same as metrics. It's the same as debug and pprof at runtime. And we don't, like, events today are kind of a crapshoot. Like, we drop tons of events on the floor. I'd like a remote events endpoint for debugging, and to be able to connect to the kubelet, for instance, and see the full unadulterated event stream. we're really lacking a lot of tools for working with it, and without some sort of off story and verification story, so that we don't unintentionally create exploits. I think we're gonna continue to struggle to operationalize Cube at scale. And audit is okay, but it's not an event stream. And if we're using it as an event stream, then we're kind of designing two systems to do the same thing. Apparently, that blew everyone's minds.
I think I actually lost the thread. How was this related to the identity stuff? Like, is it just that we don't have auth for these bits?
We rat holed from a random read on the file system.
Yes. We raced, and someone did a side channel attack on the SIG.
I would really like to explore use cases for when these credentials need to traverse multiple L7 hops, and see if that is actually a use case for the service account tokens. I think that optimally, these tokens would be not forwardable, but we could forward a proof of interaction. I can try to formalize that a little bit. I'll add that to the hardening of the tokens. And then, yeah, that's mostly what I want to achieve in the specific priorities. I think top priorities are just getting this stuff to GA, and then the rest of the stuff can be done incrementally.
What is fixed token review? What is actually required in token review?
It's been really difficult for us to figure out how to design the API such that it is backwards compatible and supports validation of different audiences. There's a lot. Everything that we've kind of looked at to do that is pretty gross. And one option we have is to just bump the API version, which is drastic. But
we'd require an audience, or if we bump the API version, or what?
Yeah.
That would be the first time we've ever done that, which because this isn't a persisted API, is a little bit less worrying, but it is something novel for us to try. I don't know that we've ever made a field required in a new API version.
That's the point of them.
Can we default it? No, well, if it's a non-persistent object, yes, that is the point of the new API version. And could we default and make it required or something like that? What is the effective default audience?
Kubernetes.
Yeah, so I mean, why can't we default it? We don't have to rat hole here, I guess, but
the issue is we have there's two token reviews. There's the webhook. There's two token review servers. There's the API server, and then there's the webhook server.
Oh.
Keeping the API consistent across those is tricky.
Should we? Is that the problem?
It would be sad to me if the API semantics were different because they are the same API. I would probably cry myself to sleep, but
tears give me strength, Mike.
Pragmatically,
Specifically your tears.
Specifically Mike Denise's tears.
Pragmatically is one possibility.
I'm trying to think of another analogy that we've had on an API where we started with having a consistent one and then realized we wanted to diverge slightly and what the trade-offs were. I'll have to go double check. This has come up before. Jordan might remember. I'll ping him and ask him.
And I will try to spend more time on it. I didn't have much time in 112.
Yeah.
That's higher priority than that, and the GA cap I will spend time on in 113. I think that's the highest priorities for me. Anybody else have unrelated stuff? Maybe stuff relating to CSI or group managed service accounts, CAP. I'm not sure if any progress was made on that, or are we purely focused on token request at this point?
At some level, it might be good for us to focus on getting that first use case enabled, just like as an overall goal.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would like to not every time I mention that Vault integration, not have to like mention caveats around it. That would be nice.
All right, let's close that out.
Yeah, and that'll enable other things too. I think it's the same scenario as in the sense of having like a concrete CSI plugin that could use the pod. Like again, that's another one that CSI needed a concrete use case to focus around. So for local storage.
Right. How's that progressing?
I haven't got an update in a couple of weeks. I'll have to go back and follow up.
Okay.
It's still kind of messy because it's just a lot of moving pieces, and CSI has their own struggles. They've got a very complex, big system that is just now starting to get used, and so it may be that we shouldn't try to expect that until like we're getting into the 113, 114, 114 phase. I don't know. I'd like to push it on to follow up with Brad.
Okay, sounds good.
Anyone have anything else they want to talk about? Otherwise, we might call it early.
Greg, I want to know why you're using an auto tuner.
Do I sound that bad, really?
When you first start talking, it comes across as very plain.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
I don't think there's anything to apologize for.
All right, let's call it early. Thanks, everyone.
Mike, can you stand for a sec?
I'm going to stop the recording.